Hi there, everybody. Welcome back to Insomnia. I'm your host, Adrian Ladelia, and let's get right into it. I was just doing some light reading here. An old book on music theory. There is indeed an awesome power that is contained within music, and it's amazing, really, how it commands such an emotional response from most people. Everyone, from a virtuoso to a non-musically inclined individual, can all appreciate a good song, especially when it speaks to a certain part of the soul. But like most power, there is both light and dark, harmony and dissonance, good and evil. Did you know that in music history, the tritone, which is a musical interval composed of three adjacent whole tones, has always had an association with the infernal? Indeed, throughout the Middle Ages, the tritone was explicitly avoided, or in some cases, even forbidden. The dissonant nature of the tritone was attributed to supernatural origins, and thus was often referred to as diabolus in musica, or the devil in music. Now, many have ventured to explain musically and mathematically as to why a tritone clashes and seemingly is a disruptive sound, but at the end of the day, it just sounds bad. However, the fact still remains that there is a moving force behind the notes that can physically and emotionally affect us, and sometimes darker forces may be at work. Today we look at one of the most infamous cases of the supernatural meeting the world of music, the legend of Robert Johnson. Before we look at the legend, we need to first take a look at the legendary art form in which it is deeply entrenched, the blues. According to many sources, blues music is a style and genre directly descended from African American culture in the deep south of the United States toward the latter half of the 19th century. The genre covers many styles and varieties, and typically harkens back to everything from African traditional music, working chants and spirit songs, all the way to European folk music. The blues is most often associated today with recognizable chord cycles, call and response themes, and the all-too-familiar 12-bar progression. The name blues is possibly derived from an 18th century phrase, the blue devils, which meant overcome by sadness and melancholy. This directly relates to the subject matter of the blues as a genre, as most of the themes are traditionally related to the struggles and hardship of African American life in the early American South. Everything from racial injustice, living in poverty, and loss of life and love, all portrayed in a powerful yet simple blues narrative. Famous icons of the genre are Ma Rainey, one of the first professional blues singers, now referred to as the mother of all blues, Charlie Patton, father of the Delta Blues from Mississippi, Blind Lemon Jefferson, founder of the Texas Blues in Dallas, to name but a few. And to put it simply, blues is the blues, but today we're focusing on one of the most important icons in the genre, a man who changed and influenced so much of the music world around him that many attributed his abilities to supernatural origins. We're talking about the legend of Robert Johnson, a man who sold his soul to the devil for fame and glory. Robert Leroy Johnson was born in May of 1911 in Hazelhurst, Mississippi. Known to many as Little Robert Dusty, he moved frequently with family and on his own before settling down and marrying his wife, a Virginia Travis, in 1929. Johnson was a driven and ambitious man, and music would always be part of his overall character. He loved singing and was both adept at the harmonica and the jaw harp. However, his wife and his unborn child would now become his full-time priority, and he labored away on a plantation to support them. Unfortunately, his wife would die in childbirth not long after they had married. Grief-struck, he had cried out for someone to help his wife and save his child. No one had answered, and with nothing else to lose, Johnson immediately abandoned his former life as a farmer and day worker to pursue a full-time music career. He moved frequently from place to place, adopting different names as he went, playing juke joints and on the streets. However, despite his efforts, he gained very minimal public recognition. In fact, some go so far as to say that he wasn't even very good. A famous blues icon, Edward Son House Jr., had commented on Johnson's inexperience with guitar, mentioning to Johnson himself how, quote-unquote, you drive the people nuts, you can't play nothing. Despite the detracting comments and adversity he had faced, Johnson was still determined to make something of himself. And in 1931, he had moved back to his hometown of Hazelhurst and met a mysterious man by the name of Ike Zimmerman, who could play the guitar like no one else. By this point, Johnson had asked Zimmerman to teach him his ways, and thus began a legend of a twisted spiritual journey. Zimmerman had instructed Johnson to practice his guitar playing in the local cemeteries, and sitting atop tombstones, the two would play on into the night. And some would say this is how Johnson had attracted the attention of an otherworldly audience. As his skills improved, Johnson was then instructed to take his guitar to the crossroads near the old Dockery plantation in Dockery, Mississippi. What happened that night is the subject of much debate. If you want to learn to play the guitar, I can show you a way to get there right quick. You take your guitar down to the old crossroads by the Dockery plantation, you know the one, and get there just before midnight, and you start playing. Play something from the soul. If you get that feeling like somebody's looking over your shoulder, well, don't you pay it no mind. You just turn around politely, and he'll be there. A traveler, much like yourself. You tell him what it is you want. Tell him you want to learn to play the guitar like nobody else before you. And he'll tune it up real quick. He'll send you on your way. You come on back to those crossroads if you ever need anything else from that traveler. But remember, everything in this world, it comes with a price. Whether or not this story is true is up for debate. Most historical records are very few and far between when it comes to actually documenting Johnson's life, but many people assume the year of the contract being signed to be around 1935-1936. Johnson would return to the music scene with an all-new power of playing, one that would captivate audiences for decades to come. Even amongst his former peers, he had stood out, with the aforementioned Son House commenting on how Johnson essentially went from being a nobody to having a profound mastery of the guitar, many going so far as to say even his recordings possessed a strange aura to them, demonstrating skills and proficiency which many consider not just unusual but downright frightening. His newly acquired skills had given him the opportunity to meet with several talent scouts and producers, and on November 23, 1936, Johnson had entered the recording studio to create what would go on to be his only record. 1937 saw the release of his most iconic and now symbolically important track, The Crossroads Blues, a song that would influence musicians for generations to come. The lyrics contain a loose narrative of a man approaching a crossroads and falling upon his knees to beg for God's mercy, to no avail, with the second half detailing the attempt to hitchhike home whilst being ignored. It would be disconcerting enough to interpret the lyrics of the song as a man in fear for his soul, and several tracks he would record only add to this notion, with titles such as Hellhound on My Trail and Me and the Devil Blues. It would appear that Johnson was making his dreams come true, but was also fearful of the result. In the summer of 1938, Johnson was playing a town dance near Greenwood, Mississippi, when he fell ill and was helped to his room. He died a few days later in a ghastly manner on August 16th. He was 27 years old. Many have speculated as to what had actually taken his life. Local doctors claimed it to have been caused by syphilis, but not many believe this to be the actual cause. In fact, it is a common theory that he was actually murdered by the jealous husband of a woman Robert had seduced. All that is known is that Johnson had died in severe fits of pain, and it was prolonged, which led to the belief that he may have been poisoned. Others had, of course, come to their own conclusions as to what really transpired that night. The devil had taken his due. Robert Johnson was a mystery of a man, and would remain so even in death. Even his burial site is uncertain, as up to 3 potential graves all claim to be his final resting place. One thing is certain, however, he is remembered as not just a master of the blues genre, but a virtuoso of the guitar who would go on forever to influence music. He was a driven man who lost everything and dedicated his life to pursuing his dream of becoming a renowned musician. The irony is that he never saw this type of fame or recognition in his lifetime, as it was only posthumously discovered and shared across not just the United States, but the entire world. This idea has only contributed to the mythos surrounding the man, as many believe this is a classic example of how dealing with the devil works. Fame and fortune can be yours, but for a price. But did you know that this is not the first tale of selling one's soul for gain? The concept of dealing with the devil has its roots in a tale from much further back in time, all the way to the early Middle Ages, the story of Saint Theophilus, the penitent cleric.
A long time ago, there was once a man named Theophilus, a devout cleric. He diligently served the church and was cherished by all those around him. When it came time to elect a new bishop of the diocese, the people flocked to Theophilus, begging him to take the position. Theophilus, in all of his humility, declined, for he believed his place would be better served amongst the people. But all would not end well, for the church had elected a new bishop, a bitter old man who heard talks of Theophilus and how the people adored him, which made him grow jealous.
How is it they don't appreciate me the same way? I'm the bishop. I was appointed by God himself.
The bishop then saw fit to have Theophilus excommunicated, and he was banished from the very city and people whom he adored.
By the power vested in me and by the authority of God himself, I excommunicate you, Theophilus, you heretic!
With nothing else, and in exile, Theophilus cried and begged for an answer, until one night he had received one. A mysterious spirit had appeared before Theophilus. It told him that it could right the wrongs that were committed against him, but for a price. Overcome by despair and sorrow, Theophilus had agreed.
The contract is sealed.
What? Who's there? Show yourself, lest the power of God strike you down. Oh, gods! Gods, help me! And your bishop is in need!
The story had reached Theophilus of what had happened to the bishop, and he was immediately offered the position. The people implored him to take it. However, Theophilus could not live with what he had done, for he had not known that this deal would end another man's life. Overcome with grief and guilt, Theophilus cries out to the spirit how he wishes to end the deal.
A pact has been made. There is no escape.
It was then that the archangel Michael had descended into this realm to banish away the evil spirit that was hounding Theophilus. The angel told Theophilus that the contract could be voided, however, it would cost his own life. And with nary a second thought, Theophilus had agreed, and he was welcomed into the kingdom of heaven.
This legend would go on to inspire several other iconic works throughout history, most notably the German legend of antiquity Faust, in which a scholarly man disregards the world and sells his soul to the devil in exchange for knowledge and wealth. It doesn't work out for him. All the way to the Washington Irving short story The Devil and Tom Walker of 1824, in which a man makes a pact with the devil for material wealth, but in exchange must then become a loan shark of sorts for others who have done the same. Doesn't work out for him. There's a bit of a trend when dealing with a devil figure. Now let's take a look at the other elements of Robert Johnson's story, namely the crossroads. Did you know that crossroads are oftentimes seen in occultism and folk beliefs as an area between two worlds? An intersecting path was oftentimes seen as a place where the veil between our world and the next is the thinnest, a place neither here nor there, things betwixt, if you will. Oftentimes these areas even fall upon what are known as ley lines, which are believed to be perfect alignments of geographically and culturally significant areas throughout the world. Places like this are where spiritual activity is highly active. And this brings us to hoodoo, also known as root working or root doctoring, which is a collection of traditional West African folk magic. In some traditions, you were instructed to go to the crossroads to meet with Papa Legba, a gatekeeper of the other world and an intermediary between humans and the spirits. Papa Legba is what is known as a Loa, a sort of emissary spirit for a great power. He is described as an old man clad in red, bearing a cane and a wide-brimmed straw hat. Legba is seen by many as a trickster spirit, akin to Loki of Nordic mythos. Many say it could have even been Legba that Johnson was actually dealing with, rather than the devil. We will never know for sure. Another interesting topic worth noting is the age at which Robert Johnson had died, 27. This brings us to what is known by many as the 27 Club, supposedly an unusual pattern of deaths amongst popular musicians who reach the age of 27, and all seem to be linked to substance abuse, suicide, and even murder. The first documented name in the trend was a Brazilian pianist known as Alexander Levy, who died in 1892, and the trend continues all the way to recent years. Whether or not this is coincidental is debatable. However, many say Johnson's story is not the only example of the devil being in the music industry. Fringe theory suggests that all sorts of elite powers implement satanic and occult imagery in popular music, but this has been the subject of much scrutiny. Despite whether or not Robert Johnson sold his soul for fame, there are several historians who say his story is not the first of a blues artist signing the pact. A blues player by the name of Tommy Johnson was said to have been the start of this legend, and due to the similarities of their names, the legend became associated with Robert Johnson instead. Regardless, a man chased his dreams, reached a point of success, then died a year later, in which his career would then skyrocket afterwards. That alone is enough for most people to take notice, and whether or not you believe, to quote the usual suspects, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he doesn't exist. I'm your host, Adrian Ladelia, and this is Insomnia.
Well, I went down to the churchyard one night. It's where I used to play. But the people there, they ain't talking much. Ain't much talking from the grave. Well, I went down by the river where I saw a man drown. Can't say that I feel very sorry for him, 'cause my troubles, they're still around. Oh, the devil, he comes, takes my soul away. So you better learn from my mistakes. Only friend I got right now is the guitar that I play. Even he won't be sticking around. When it's coming down to pay, I can't say I'm much of a man with no woman by my side, and all there is fire wind. Try to love again. Oh, the devil,